Hello, my name is Kai, and I am a bit of a rambler. I like to travel, learn, and tell stories. Today, I want to talk about mountains because I liked climbing mountains as a kid, and I always got into it. But when I was living in China, it hit me after like a year that I hadn't climbed any mountains, and they had some of the most famous and awe-inspiring mountains in the world. After all, I'd seen Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. So I'm just realizing now I probably could have climbed that. Which mountain was that? I'm going to check if I climbed that mountain. Oh, it was Huangshan. Okay, so yes, I've climbed the mountain in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Not just a joke. That's the most famous mountain in China. They say there are 5 mountains in China, and if you climb 4 of them, you never need to see another mountain again. But if you climb Huangshan, you don't need to look at those 4 mountains. That means I was in that town too, Hongcunjian. That's cool. I was in the town and Crouching. I didn't even know. Wow, I am pretty clueless sometimes. Good to find this out a decade later. Okay, so anyway, I climbed a lot of mountains. We can easily say 50. If we're counting individual peaks, then well over 100 or a couple hundred. I don't know. It's a lot. Like Huashan by itself had 5, 7 peaks. I don't know. And I climbed all of them the same night I went there. The mountains in China are great. Not for the least reason of them having steps. They all have steps because every mountain is thousands of years old and people have been climbing up it so much, eventually a monk was like, let us have steps. And then they cut steps into the mountain. They all have 100 stories for each mountain. And they have little stone explanation things sometimes, and sometimes there's just steps. But it is pretty nice having steps going up every major mountain in China. They don't all. Some of them have paths, and I went on probably more of those, honestly, because I would just find a mountain. But all of the main ones have these steps, and it feels like you're ascending a program. It feels like you're getting something done, accomplishing something with these steps. And it's amazing to be walking up the steps and then see someone carrying 2 huge, oil drum-sized buckets of water up these sheer steps, and they're 90 years old with a bamboo pole hung between 2 giant gallon or oil drums filled with water barrels, some would call them. So it's nice that they all have steps. It is very Chinese, like getting to the top of the mountain. In America, we're we don't use steps. You pull yourself up and all that kind of, you hike the trails if they give you a trail. But in China, they're no, you're trying to get to the top of the mountain. That's what you do. You build a stairway to the top. That's where you're trying to get to. There's so many fun cultural things about China that just still make me laugh to this day. If you explain to a Chinese person, no, we don't use steps. You need to really fight through it. They're oh, that doesn't sound as enjoyable. Doesn't that make it unnecessarily difficult? And of course, in certain respects, they're right and wrong, and so are we. So while you're climbing mountains in China, you can appreciate that there are step paths up and that, millions of people have climbed those steps before you. There's memory in them. You can see the individual footprints in the stone in a lot of the mountains. That's pretty cool. That's, living history, memory in the rock of a mountain. It's pretty impressive to see a lot. And they wind off, there are multiple, there's not just one step going up. All the paths go all around, so you can take all these different nice, comfortable stairway paths that are not easy by any stretch of the imagination. Many people take breaks multiple times along the ascent, and it can still take hours. But it's just nice that they have steps, and it's funny in this world, especially as an American, where everything is, the oldest thing in our country is less than 200 years old. I know, I'm just saying, it's about 200 years old. And then they're well, this one's 3,000 years old. There's another one that's, 3,500 years old. And their mountains are so much older in terms of human habitation that after however long it took, they were just you know what, time for some stairs. Let's skip over this not having stairs thing. Everyone's going to keep climbing up mountains for another 1,000 years. Let's put in a stairway. So The mountains in China have stairs. I find it charming and fun and culturally relevant. It kind of sticks out to me as like this new way to look at hiking a mountain, which before I would have scoffed at as an American because my cultural experience is I can do this myself. But it's a good lesson to see, yeah, they have steps. Okay, so I want to tell my mountain stories, and I think I'm going to start with Taishan, which is next to the town Tai'an, where a girlfriend was from, and she said I should climb Taishan. And that's really all the convincing I need pretty much of anything. So we went, took a train over there, and I was already loving it because as soon as you're climbing a mountain, you're above the pollution in China, which is mostly like this dirt cloud above the biggest cities. And as soon as you're out of the biggest cities, the air is pretty clean, sometimes shockingly clean. And we hiked through the night so that we would be able to see the sunrise together. And I don't remember much of it because, there are stairs, so it's not like you had to go through, you didn't have to improvise a path or trailblaze anything. But it was a nice climb up, and I hiked a lot, and I ran a lot, so I got to look like strong because I didn't have to take breaks, and I was like, no, take your time, it's fine. Sometimes we all need a rest. I'm fine, no. Then we kept going up. And when we got to the top, it was cold, and I wasn't thinking because I don't even think I had a jacket at that point. I might have had a hoodie, but I didn't bring my hoodie. And it was maybe, 45 degrees Fahrenheit. It was like 20 degrees Celsius. And I was starting to shiver, and I was like, oh boy, like if we have to wait here, because we had to wait now for an hour for the sun to rise because we got up a little faster than we did. It took a couple hours or something. Might have taken 4 hours. Might have taken a while. I can't remember. And my girlfriend at the time helped me buy one of those huge Russian thick winter coats or Mongolian coats that they wear that are just super thick. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. And there's just a guy up there with a huge hut full of these super warm coats that you can rent for a couple dollars while you wait for the sun to rise on this magical peak. Now, I say magical because this sunrise is one of the most insane things I have ever seen, and I still don't know what happened exactly. And I'm sure I've come across the words for this phenomenon before, but I don't know what those words are now, and I sure didn't have words for it back then. But we were with a group of, 50 to 100 people who had made it up before the sunrise, and we're all waiting. And it's just, the sky's a little bit brighter, and then it's like, okay, we're at the time. The sun's about to start rising. And then the thing is, we had to stare at the horizon because there was a flood of clouds suddenly. They all rolled in and covered all of the lower peaks. We were on the highest peak, the actual Taishan peak. And all the other peaks were lower, and they were all covered in clouds. And on the sides, there were larger peaks like poking up through the clouds. But in front of us, out to the horizon where the sun was going to rise, there was just a field of fluffy but almost dense clouds. It was already absurdly beautiful and romantic and in the poetical sense of the word. And the romantic sense of the word, come to think of it. My girlfriend was very happy to be there. And then I was just staring because I was like, I'm going to see that horizon sunrise first before anyone else. And then there was a weird light bulb thing poking up in the middle of the field of clouds. So we're on a mountain. There are mountains off to the sides, and then a huge field of clouds heading off into the horizon. And in the middle of the field of clouds, a light came up. And I was like, what the fuck is that? Is that like a air tower or like a freaking 4G tower with a light blinking? And then it kept coming up and getting brighter, and I realized it was the sun. The sun was rising in the middle of the bank of clouds we were all staring at. And I was like, very confused. And everyone was like looking excited. And then they started like, wow, what is it doing? What is it doing there? And that's what I was wondering. And I asked my girlfriend, like, do you see the sun? Is it in the middle of the clouds? And she was like, yeah, it's in the middle of the clouds. And I was like, how? That's where the land is. How is the sun coming up from the land instead of behind this miles-long bank of clouds at the horizon? Why is it coming up in the middle of the clouds? And she was like, I don't know. And it was a deep, deep red, orange, not bright yellow, deep, deep red, orange. And it was like pushing up through the clouds. This like Lion King ass sun. And it was so bewildering. All of us just stared at it and watched it. And it, after it passed like the halfway point and half of it wasn't covered by the clouds anymore, it got a little more yellow. And then the more it left the cloud cover, the more yellow the sun became. And then it came all the way out of the middle of the cloud bank, and it wasn't obscured by any clouds, and it became a bright yellow of, the sun after it's risen. But it changed from red to orange to the bright regular sun yellow. And once it got high enough over the bank of clouds, then it looked like it was back in the horizon. But it came up, optically anyway, in the middle of the cloud bank. Very clearly. Like, it wasn't almost near the horizon. It was like halfway to us, halfway in the middle of this in the middle of a miles-long cloud bank. So a mile and a half in, a mile and a half away from us. Or half a mile, really. It was pretty close. It felt close. It looked very close. And everyone agreed, like, that was weird that the sun came up in the middle of the cloud bank, like over the land instead of in the horizon. And then we all gave our coats back and started walking back down the mountain, like in, straggling pairs or whatever. And that sight has stuck in my mind forever. And it's, thinking about it now, I can very clearly see it. And I was telling this story recently, and the person asked, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I know how it sounds when the cloud rises over land through cloud banks, but that's what it looked like. It was nuts. And I was with my friends, so they were like, have you asked her if she saw the same thing? And I hadn't in a decade. So I was like, that's a great idea. So I reached out and I asked her about what she saw when we saw the sun rise. And she didn't quite know what I was getting at. And while we were seeing it, she did look really confused at what was happening, but was just like accepting it. So then I asked her, like, well, when the sun rose, did it rise on the horizon, like behind the mountains and everything? Did it rise how it normally rises? Or did it rise in the middle of a cloud bank? And immediately she said, oh, it came from the middle of the clouds. The sun rose in the middle of the clouds. There were clouds behind it and clouds in front of it from where we were. But the sun didn't rise on the horizon where it should have. It rose in the middle of all the clouds. So I have at least one other person who was right next to me when it happened who also remembers the sun rising through clouds with a mile or so of clouds behind it. It was and there wasn't another sunrise at the same time. There was one blood orange, blood red sun rising in the middle. And then when it was high enough, it looked like it was back on the horizon. But when it rose through a cloud bank. Glad to share. That was one of the craziest things I have ever seen in my life. Another crazy thing was this like cow I saw in a forest that I didn't realize we tracked until we were like 10 feet away from it, and it was just staring at us, and that was pretty freaky. But the sun was more impressive. The sun was crazy. So that's my Taishan story. I should probably bring up the monk story because I was with the same girlfriend on a different mountain closer to Beijing when this happened. And this story makes me laugh to this day. Because a lot of Chinese people, people from every country have conceptions of Americans. And they act on those concepts the same way that everybody does. So shut up, Kai. So when I walked up, he saw a foreigner and a monk huddled. We were like halfway up the mountain by this point after 90 minutes of walking, I'll say. And he scuttled out of his hovel built into the side of the mountain. And he was like, hello, where are you from? And he was all dressed all monk-like. And I was like, it's nice to meet you. I'm from Hawaii. And he was like, that's great. So what are you doing in China? Do you like it? Yes, of course. Everyone asked the same things the first time. Do you eat spicy food? I do. Ah. And then he said, look at you. You're very strong, aren't you? Americans are very strong. And I'm like a pretty thin guy. But I was jogging a lot and working out. And I was like, oh, thank you, monk, for noticing. He's like, but that doesn't matter. And I was like, well, it's kind of important to remain like physically, capable of things. And he was like, how do you even know you're strong? And I was like, wow, this is an aggressive monk. And this is right in the first year when I got there. So my Chinese was still really bad. And I wanted to explain my exercise routine and why it was important to, do yoga and stretch also in addition to weight, whatever. But I couldn't explain that properly. Like I tried a few times and had false starts. Then I was like, exercise, duan lian, which I did know how to say. And then I did some push-ups in front of him. And he laughed in a monk-like way and shook his head and turned to my girlfriend and said, you see, Americans don't understand. And then he turned to me and he said, that does not make you strong. What makes you strong is how many of you there are. And I was like, oh, okay, I get it. Like I instantly saw where he was going. He was like, do you know how many people America has? Do you know how many people China has? I was like, yep, yeah, I get it. And he was like, so you are this stick. And he held up this, I don't know, let's say finger-sized stick. He's like, very strong, very big, very strong American, right? And I was like, oh, no, not really, but thank you. But if you have a group of people, and he held up the twigs, they together are stronger than one branch. And he pointed to, the me stick. And I was like, that's correct. That's a good point. And he turned to my girlfriend. He's like, see, we Chinese can teach Americans. And then I said, though, if you have many branches, all of the branches together will be stronger than all of the sticks together. Is that correct, teacher? And you could just see his face like drop. And he had this murderous, you motherfucker look behind his eyes. And he was like, he doesn't get it, to my girlfriend. Whirled around and scurried back into the mountain shack. And she was like, oh, no, he gets it. And he really does like China. And she was like trying to mollify him. But that's still one of the funniest things that happened to me on a mountain. Thanks, old monk. I didn't mean anything by it, but, you didn't have to start shit neither. So a few years into my China journey, a friend showed up, and I had been inviting people to China for all 3 years, and my mom actually made a visit for a couple of weeks and had quite an adventure, mostly just eating good food and listening to me speak Chinese and being just completely unimpressed, thinking I was terrible, and then watching other foreigners speak Chinese being like, oh, Kai, did you see how good how does he do it? I was like, I ordered for you like 10 minutes ago. But she had a good time. And finally, another person agreed to visit, Josh. So he came over and I showed him Rick and Morty. I have to say that because it just stuck out. I was like, I just watched the funniest TV show I've ever seen, and showed him Rick and Morty. And I watched the entire first season again with him because the first season was so good. I was like, yeah, I can watch this entire thing again, even though I watched the whole thing yesterday, 13 hours ago. And we did that. And then he was looking to do something more fun, and I was looking to be very drunk for the rest of the year as I had been for the entire beginning of that year, because the first 3 years in China I was just drunk. And he was like, let's do something. Let's go to a club or climb a mountain. And I was like, well, the clubs suck because they're loud and I don't like them. But mountains are cool. Do you want to go to a mountain? Are you sure? Because we could just get drunk and maybe watch Rick and Morty again. He was like, no, I feel like we should do something because we've been drunk for like 4 days. And upon realizing that we had already spent 4 days in a haze of insobriety, after, making sure one more time he really wanted to do anything physical outside, not next to a restaurant or bar, we went out and got tickets to Huashan, which is the most dangerous mountain in the world. The most people die on it. Slightly less people die on it now. I think it's like 20 people a year die climbing the cliffside thing now. But there's a cliffside part of the trail where you climb down like a hole the size of a manhole, and then you go on 2 small planks of wood, like maybe a foot to 18 inches wide, 30 centimeters, folks. And you just lean against the mountain and scooch along these wooden planks until you get around the crazy side of the trail, with no fence or boundary line and no safety ropes. And used to be like 100 people were dying every year because it's a plank on the bald face of a mountain. And then they finally installed safety lines, so you had something to hold on to after, I don't know, it happened like 2018? Very recently they added in these safety lines, and now only 20 people die a year or something. And, but that's like the cool one. I had been climbing mountains, for a year or something, but I was like, I haven't gone to Huashan yet. It's supposed to be the dangerous, crazy one. And he was like, great, let's go. So the next day I was like, well, let's get drunk one more day. we can go tomorrow. It's already the afternoon. The day is shot. And we did that. And so we got the train to Huayin, which was the city near the famous mountain, Huashan. Shan means mountain in Chinese, in Mandarin anyway. Oh, I think it's in Cantonese also. Anyway, so we're on the train and we jump off and the sun is just setting. And I was like, oh, right, we're going to be hiking at night. So we just went up, bought a ticket, and then they let us walk up a mountain in what rapidly became pitch blackness. It was very dark. And this was a great mountain climb. I had a very good time. I like the nighttime already, and it was the perfect temperature. There was fog rolling everywhere. There's a paved path and then steps leading to the next paved path. There are huge courtyards. But before we got to the courtyards, we're 100 meters down the pathway, and there's one other guy. I think we might have had a beer. We did. You know what? We went to a restaurant and had dinner and a couple beers first. So by the time we actually got on the mountain, it was much darker. And it felt like evening, nighttime then. The sun was totally gone. And so I didn't expect to see many people because Chinese people do not like the dark. And they don't like remote locations. They like to be with other people. So I was like, we're probably going to be the only people climbing up this mountain. And I was nearly right. It wasn't 100 meters. It was more like a half a mile or something, like a kilometer. And there was these like resting pagodas, sort of gazebos with like a picnic table. And even at night, there were little snack shops, like vendors selling instant noodles and snacks and all that kind of stuff. And in the third one we passed, there was this guy slurping down a bowl of noodles. And I was like, whoa, okay, maybe there will be a couple other people. And I saw him look up at us and stare at us. And I was just like, hey, ni hao. And he's like, huh. And then went back to slurping his noodles. But the look in his eyes, I was like, something's going on. He has some weird look in his eyes. But I was like, whatever, we got to climb this mountain. And we just kept walking. And then after, we're a little ways past him, maybe 30 feet or so. And I hear him jump up and scuttle, like push everything into his backpack and then running behind us. And he shows up and he's like, "Wait, and what's up, guys? What are you doing?" And I was like, "Yeah, climbing the mountain." And he's like, "Cool, cool, 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 cool. So I'm just going to translate everything into English now. Can I come with you guys?" And I was like, "Oh, and he goes, "'Cause it's very dark and I don't want to climb the mountain in the dark because of how scary it is." And I was just like, "Yeah, I think that's fine by me." And I asked Josh and he was like, "Yeah, sure, of course." And so we had a third member of our party and he was effusively happy. He was ecstatic that he was able to go up. And he was like, I wasn't even hungry. I was eating those noodles just so I was waiting for someone else to come by so I had someone to climb the mountain with at night." I was like, "Okay, yeah, great, man. So what's your name?" And we started trading stories and he was happy that I could speak some Chinese and I translated a bit for Josh. But mostly we just climbed this mountain and I answered his questions. "Do you eat spicy food?" "I do." "What?" And then it was like maybe 2 miles later, we'll say, and we're making our way up the mountain, and there's still these pagodas because we're not quite into they're still fairly common, but this is like the end of all the base camp area. And there's another guy eating like noodles and snacks and a soda, and we pass by and he like looks up and gives me a look, and I was like, it's going to happen. He's going to do the exact same thing. And he did. He packed everything up, ran after us, and he was like, "Hey, group of friends, do you want to all travel up the mountain together, perhaps? It's kind of dark right now. A little bit scary." And then the other Chinese guy was like, "Oh, I know. That's why I'm with them. I didn't even know either." And I was like, "Yeah, man, that's fine. Come join us. It's totally cool." And so we all climbed up the mountain together. And it was great. It was a great hike up. There's like Buddhist's Palm, which when you're halfway up, there's this valley. And on the other side of the valley from the main trail is a huge, like, I don't even know how large it was, maybe 30 meters, 100 feet, palm of granite poking out of the side of the mountain where no vegetation grows on it because it's just rock face, but it's in the shape of a palm, and it is like a thumb and 4 fingers, and just stamped right onto the side of the mountain. That was definitely one of the coolest things I saw on Huashan. And it's a very blatant palm print, so we all saw it. It was very cool. And then we went up and we explored the plaza courtyards, which were really creepy because they all still look like old imperial fortresses and bridges and gates. And the fog is rolling around everywhere. And now it's pitch black. It's midnight or something. We were on the mountain proper. And we just go from one courtyard to the rest, get lost, look at the bells and lanterns and all the stuff they have. And some people live in those places still, just live up on top of the mountain. Some of the vendors and some of the caretakers of the mountain. And so you can see people scurrying back and forth with lanterns in these ghost cities halfway up the mountain, ghost villages. And that was also very cool. We got to the romantic part of the bridge where if you're going with your girlfriend, you bring a lock and put the lock on the fence to, cement your love as permanent. And I found one that was unlocked. So I took it off and thought of my girlfriend and locked it again. But maybe, I was using an open lock, someone else's lock, so maybe that's why it didn't work out, and we eventually broke up a few times over a couple of years. And so after the bridge, which was fun, we all like laughed because we were 4 boys and we were like, love is dumb. Then what was the next thing? You know what? We got to the top of a peak. And that was the real peak I wanted to go to. There were like 7 peaks. And I was like, that's the real peak. Like I fucking knew anything. And so we made it to the top of that peak. And all 4 of us were like, wow, we did it. Because it was like 5 hours to the top, 6 hours. I don't know. It was a long hike to one of the main peak of Huashan. And then we're standing on the peaks. And I look to my left and right. And I can see the other peaks in the distance. And I was like, you want to just go to like that second peak? And the other 3 guys were like, yeah, I mean, I guess it's still not, we're not doing anything. Let's go to the next one. I was like, great. And then we went to the next one. And then I was like, you guys want to go to like the third peak? And some of them had crazy bridges you had to cross, and some of them had like wooden scaffolding you had to step on and jump around, or maybe I just did that. And the sun was starting to come up finally. And it was raining at that point, so there was like water running down the mountain and the trails we were on. But there was a chain link like hanging down from one trail to the other, and you could climb up it. It was like 20 feet. And I don't know if I was wasted or exhausted, but it was really hard for me to climb this chain link. I went first because I had invited Josh, and then I was kind of the leader of that party. I was deciding where we go. So I was like, yep, let's do it. Let's just do it. It looks really dangerous because there's water raining down the chain link, and it does look a little slippery, but let's just go out there. And I did. I got to the top, and I was like 20 feet up, and my arms were shaking my hands, and I didn't think it was fear because I didn't feel, oh no, I'm afraid I'm going to fall. I was just like, oh, I think the fatigue in my muscles is just about done. I don't think I am adequately physically prepared for this task. And then I just hung on because I feel like if I took another one, I'd fall off. And then I literally thought to myself, what, are you just going to die? Like I was making fun of myself. And then I was like, well, no. And then I climbed up the rest of the chain link to the next trail. And I leaned back over and I was like, guys, it's really slippery and dangerous. Please be careful. And Josh was like, yeah, okay. And he just came up in like 10 seconds. It was totally fine. And then the other two guys did too. And they were like, that was really hard. I was like, yeah, I agree. But I'm fine. Nothing to worry about. And that was actually really fun because we all climbed up this crazy chain that you didn't need to. It saved us like 10 steps, but it was fun and a little scary and just a good adventure. Okay, so now we're up like 5 peaks at this point. And I think there were a couple more peaks. And I was like, Josh, you want to go to the 6th peak? And I must have, I probably was drinking a bunch of beer going up because there were some 24-hour places. I can't imagine I was not drinking beer on top of that mountain. That's absurd for me to think. When I would ride my bike to mountains, I would carry packs of beer in my backpack. So anyway, I was like, let's go to that, half a dozen peak over there. Number 6. And the 2 guys were like, oh, we've already climbed like 5 peaks and we keep saying yes, but like the sun's up. So we're going to go get our bus. Our bus is coming soon. So we got to and I was like, oh yeah, that's totally fine. Josh? And he was like, yeah. And I remember when we were going on to this next peak, he was like, I noticed that you always say probably or soon when you talk about when we're getting to the next peak or when the next thing we're going to is. You always say, it's right up around here. It'll be up there in about 20 minutes. But then we get there in 30 minutes. And then you say there's like 4 peaks, but I'm pretty sure this is the 6th peak so far. I was like, yeah, it looks like there's like 7 peaks. There might be 9. I don't know. There's a lot of peaks. He's like, I think that's how you keep going. You have like this incremental, you're never going to quit because there's one next thing. And I was like, that's exactly how I talk so that I don't scare people who may not have the physical stamina or maniacal focus on exertion that I do. Prolonged exertion. And he's like, okay, I got it now. Just good to know that whenever you say we're going to be there, it means we will get there eventually. It might just not be imminent. And I was like, yeah, exactly, right. We will get there. That's all I'm saying. I'm just saying it in a way that makes everyone feel comfortable. So we'd been on the mountain for 12 hours at this point, 11 hours, something like that, from when we started climbing. And I was like, we never went to the death walk, the the death place. And Josh is like, what? And I was like, there's this place where people die all the time, like constantly. We should check it out. And it's drizzling, and he's just climbed 7 peaks. And he's like, yeah, we're there. We should go, I guess. And he was game for it. So we went, and because he is a good sport and was a very good friend. And so we made our way over to that, which was like back near one of the other peaks. And I was like, ooh, we got to walk back to like the first peak now. And it's like giant cliff death plank walk. dangerous. Do not enter. And anytime it is raining, do not go here. And it was, I'll say, heavily sprinkling at that point, to the point that small rivulets of water were all around. And there were barricades put up, like 5 sloppy barricades stacked in front of each other, blocking the entrance to the death walk. And I was like, we should just go anyway, right, though? And he's like, well, what do the signs say? I was like, well, they say don't go if it's raining. And it's like raining all around us. And then they say it's very dangerous and there are no handholds or anything. And he was like, well, we probably shouldn't go on the death walk then, that people die on all the time. And I was like, you know what, I'll be right back. And I vaulted the collection of barricades like they were a picket fence and I was about to steal an apple pie from the sill. And made my way to a foreboding-looking cave entrance that opened right next to it onto this like manhole-sized hole with a couple rebar rods stuck into the stone of the mountain, and then there's a hole going down. So I went down, I climbed down it, and I was like, ooh, these rebars are kind of slippery with all this rain. And then that opens out the mountain. As soon as you get to the bottom of the slippery rebar vertical tunnel, you turn around from the, we'll call it a ladder, it is not, and you're facing the open valley that's like 1,000 feet down or whatever. It's very far away. And there's a little bridge with like 2 2x5s, like tiny little bridge, like I said, a foot across, maybe. And I was like, well, I should check if it's safe. And so I went out and started like walking on it and stood, looked over the edge. I was like, that is far. And I looked at this. I was like, there's no barrier holding you inside. And I hear Josh climbing down behind me. And I start moving out. And I was like, well, it's wide enough for like feet. And so I walk a couple steps and it's slippery because it's raining and this is a tiny bridge. And I wisely turned back and said, you know what? We could die. We could easily die here. This is very dangerous. There's nothing in the mountain wall. There's no barrier fence. This is a tiny bridge and we have to walk for like hundreds of feet, like easily a couple 100 meters. And Josh was like, yep, okay. And we went back up the manhole and left. He did go out and check it out also, a couple steps just to see, but it looked perilously foolish a path to take. So we did not. We declined. And we went back and we hopped back over those barriers and boom, we climbed every peak that was on my offline maps app. So I was satisfied. And Josh was like, thank God. And we went down the mountain, got some breakfast beers, and Josh probably got breakfast. And then he was like, well, I need a souvenir because that was an adventure. That was a crazy adventure, and I need a souvenir. And so we walked around and looked at all this stuff. And then there was a short sword. And Josh was like, that's it. Like, I want a short sword. And I was like, oh, okay. But you have to like get on a plane to go back to America. And he's like, I can mail it, whatever. Now, knives of any kind are basically illegal in China, and they're super illegal on trains. But I didn't think about that. So I haggled with the lady, and she was like, yeah, for sure. You guys are American. That's cool. I don't know, $40. And I was like, definitely. How about like $5? And she was like, no way. I need like, I don't know, $30. And I was like, that's cool. We can give you 15. Is $15 okay? That seems more than fair for this. And she was like, how about 20? I was like, 17. And we got the knife. And I was like, oh, you know what? You have to take this on the train, and those are expressly prohibited. And he's like, oh, well, shit, because he had just bought it. And so I thought, and I was like, you know what? I can probably just talk to him. And so we took it to the conductor, and Josh was carrying basically nothing. But you could see, but he was like carrying a knife. I can't remember if it was in his hand or if it was sticking out of his tiny camelback, whatever. But it was very clear he was carrying what is either a very large knife or a slightly less than normal sized sword. So as we're passing through the gate there, security guard's like, hey, is that a large knife? And I told him, no, it's just a souvenir from that old grandma up the place. And he was like, well, you can't take any knives on the train. And I was like, oh, no, I get it. It's definitely not a knife. It's like, it doesn't even cut. It's like a souvenir thing. And we had checked, and it was a very sharp sword. Like, yeah, it cuts. But I was like, it doesn't even cut. She just told me it's like a souvenir old thing. You know, it's just the old grandma sell it, which is like the old grandma sell knickknacks on the bridge all the time and stuff. And he was like, really? And I was like, yeah, she told me. I asked her and she was like, not a sword. What she had told me was that it was a real sword and it was very sharp, which she was right about. But I told the security guard, yes, she assured us that it's safe. It's even safe for the train, she said, because it doesn't have a blade. And it's in its scabbard at this point, so he can't look directly at the blade, which really would have given it away because it was razor sharp. And he's like, well, okay, just let us through onto the train with a sword. And Josh took that sword home. He mailed it apparently to his house. I don't know if he still has it. I should check. He did have it for years, and I was very happy when I accidentally discovered that. I was talking to him later. I was like, do you remember that mountain thing we climbed for a while? Years later, and he was like, oh, yes, I still have the sword. Like, I still have the sword displayed in my home. And that was pretty cool to find out. You know, I never know how long these things are going to go. I have like 5 points written on my outline that I was like, oh, you should probably mention this stuff. And now it's been almost 45 minutes. Whereas I'll write down like a whole page and I'm done in 15. Fascinating to hear behind the scenes stories, isn't it? Wish I had a better one, sorry. Not deleting this. Gotta get those minutes up, you know what I mean? Okay, so my last story is kind of a cool down story. I started climbing mountains, not because of the very good reasons that they were in Crouching Tiger and Hidden Dragon like I didn't know but still climbed, but that I wanted some alone time. I lived, when I started living in China, in a very small town where I was the second white person anyone had ever seen. And I know that because everyone in the village told me that. And the first person was the guy who owned the school who hired me, who already lived there. And a 10-minute bike ride outside, like, I went to the next village over, basically, which is like 90 minutes outside of Beijing by bicycle. It's close to a populated center, I mean. And everyone there was like, whoa, there's a white person here. And that village was like, you're the first white person we've ever seen. Because the guy I knew apparently never went to any of the other villages. So that was bizarre in and of itself. But because of that, I got a lot of attention. And every now and then I'd be like, boy, everyone staring at me every single time I leave my house and not saying anything, but just staring is a lot of attention, too much attention for me after months. So I was like, how can I like kind of get away from the pack and, you know, kind of have some me time, get some alone time again. Because I do a lot of solitary activities. And then I looked around and I saw a mountain and I was like, oh, right. I live next to a tiny mountain range. Maybe I should see how far away they are. And then I just started walking toward one of the mountains. And then I was all of a sudden halfway to the mountain and it was much bigger. And I kept walking and then there was a path leading up into the mountain. And it took like an hour to walk before I got to there. But I was like, okay, I can just walk to mountains. And that became regular. Like once every other day, I would probably go ride my bike or just walk to the mountain and climb up the mountain, which took 45 minutes, we'll say, to the top because they were tiny. And then just walk along for hours. And I was enjoying just walking, being by myself. But after a while, I was like, I should do something. And that is how I started listening to audiobooks, which I had never listened to before. And I listened to all the Game of Thrones that were written at the time. Did not find out that series was not finished until I got to the 5th book or whatever it was. This was before the TV show even came out. But everyone was like, this is the best series. You should totally read it. And I was like, wow, it is good. This will be such a good story. And then it just ended. And he was like, it'll be out next year. And now it's been 15 years and he was lying. And then I just kept going out onto the mountains and listening to audiobooks or listening to podcasts. I also really got into podcasts while I was in China and walking these mountains. And I still do that now. Listen to something and walk around for hours. That's how I get a lot of my exercise. And that became a passion. That's how I started climbing mountains. And then I was like, well, even these dinky mountains right next to the city are really cool. What do the other mountains look like? And that's how I started going to all the other mountains, including random mountains. I would choose on my offline map, there was just like a triangle, and that meant that a peak was there. So I would check the elevation of a random peak, like if I was working a lot at the time or I just didn't have the time to go for a full trip, I would get on my bike and I would ride my bike for like 4 or 6 hours in a direction toward a peak that I saw on my map and be like, when I climb that one, it's like, 5,000 feet, I'll do that. And it was really cool. I would go through all these new towns that I had never seen before, listen to podcasts or audiobooks on the way there. I had a hammock in my backpack just in case I stayed overnight because, sometimes I'm riding my bike really far. My sleeping bag in case it got cold, if it was cold. I didn't bring it if it wasn't. Yeah, I had a few essentials. I would grab like a beer every hour and have a beer break and then keep riding wherever I was going. And that was so much fun, going to new places where I knew nothing and everybody was like, what the heck is this foreigner doing here? This is weird. He shouldn't be here. And I just saw things they're not in a book, there's this Buddha that's not in a book anywhere, but it's sitting there in the mountain. And there's a mountain that's not in any of the books that no one ever wrote about, but it has a whole path and you can climb it and there's a pagoda and there's a beautiful like garden and there's jade sculptures and like it's fascinating just going to random places and finding out what there is. So I loved adventuring on my bike, going to random mountains. And I guess we'll actually finish out with this story, which is fitting. It's a night climb. So I rode my bike for a few hours to one of the triangles on my map. And it was always fun getting there because I didn't even know how to get there. Sometimes the roads would be closed, but there's, food everything's great. So I rode there and I got there and it was like 5 p.m. The sun was starting to set and there was the ticket office and I was like, hello, 1 ticket. He was like, sorry, we just closed. It's like 5:15. Yeah, we just closed the gates. I'm sorry. And I was like, oh, that's okay. Can you just sell me a ticket and then just let me go through and I'll come back down when I'm done? He's like, I want to. And the thing is, what I asked for almost always gets agreed to, at least in those days. It seems like it still does outside of Beijing. Inside of Beijing, kind of a problem with Xi these days. But that being said, less than 1 year ago, I climbed a mountain that you aren't supposed to climb, and I went into a forbidden part of it. And the security guards were very nice and just explained to me after they were like, what are you doing on the forbidden mountain? And they let me go back down. I explained that I was just hiking the mountain and I didn't know it was forbidden, which I actually didn't know I couldn't climb in that particular path. And they were fine about it. But in Beijing in particular, it did seem more laid back before. In those days, you were like, do you think I can just do it anyway, though? And very often the answer from whoever was in charge was like, yeah, okay, whatever. But this guy was like, no, I'm sorry. It's against the rules. I can't do it. You can't climb the mountain because it's night. It's dangerous, I'm sorry. And I was like, oh, all right, that's okay. And so I left and I walked into the tree line across the street. I rode my bike into the tree line across the street, pushed it in, set up my hammock, took out a beer, watched a TV show or read a book or something I think I was reading a book actually, on my phone, drank a beer and ate snacks while I waited for him to leave. And he packed up his office, he locked it, he closed the gate, locked that, left, and I waited like 20 more minutes, let the light get a little bit darker, and then I walked out of the woods with just my backpack on, a couple of beers, a couple of snacks, and I climbed the, I don't know, like 10-foot fence. It wasn't super high, and it was like a grated iron thing. So I just climbed up it, jumped over the gate, and just walked straight up and climbed that mountain in the dark. Came down 6 hours later, a while later, and it was just this great, fun adventure climbing a mountain at night. It was there wasn't anything particularly remarkable other than just I found a new adventure. I got to climb the mountain. It's a Chinese mountain, so there's like paths and stairs, and it was a little dangerous in the pitch black, but not really dangerous. And I had my phone, and I saw these fountains and statues, and it's night, and there's clouds, and there's ghosts, you know, the feeling of atmospheric spirit is just hanging in the air, in the witching hour air. There was actually some cool mist and fog rolling around. And it was just this beautiful, serene, especially serene experience with clean air because I had, 3 hours outside of Beijing. And it felt like no one ever climbed this place. And it was just very cool. So I got to the top, I hung out, surprise, surprise, I had a beer. And then I climbed my way back down, went down a different path than it took on the way up because there was a different path. And it wasn't even on my offline map or anything, but there were steps, and I was like, it probably goes down to the bottom. And it did. I just followed it all the way to the bottom, a couple different stairways, and I got there, climbed back over the fence, went back into the forest, collected my stuff. Actually, you know what? I napped for like a couple hours, and then I biked back at 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning or something, and it was great. And I had that kind of adventure climbing random mountains dozens of times, because how fun is it to climb a mountain by yourself in the serene quiet of just natural sounds, but you have a walkway up the mountain, you have some cool music to listen to or whatever, and you're just vibing with nature and the granite rock face or whatever. It was so cool. And so I did that all the time. Every weekend, I would ride out to another random triangle, and I always put a check mark on the ones I did, and I had dozens of those, but it was just for fun. I didn't even learn the names of most of the mountains. That is night climb. So, yeah, I'm just sharing these stories. I hope you liked these stories. I really like talking about them again, reliving these experiences. So I'll see you on the next one. You know what? I just realized that I've only talked about the Chinese mountains, and I've been in like 30 countries. I definitely have more mountain stories. Okay, I will talk about those mountain stories on the next one. Actually, you know what? That'll just be the next one. You know what? But on this one, I just thought of a very nice memory I had. So I'm going to tell you one final story with a bit of the bubbly in it that has to do with the same mountain I encountered the aggressive monk. Was a bottle of champagne. It was one of my first dates after getting serious with my girlfriend at the time, and we just felt very comfortable as a couple, and so we were going to hike a mountain near her hometown called Taishan. And I wanted to make it special, so I brought like a bunch of different kinds of snacks in my backpack, just a normal sized backpack, and a large bottle of champagne that didn't even fit in the backpack. It was actually a day pack. It wasn't even a backpack. So there was a huge bottle of champagne, like 6 different snacks, and then my metal water bottle. And I was very careful to separate my metal water bottle from the champagne bottle so she didn't hear it clinking with like a package of beef jerky or something. I can't remember what it was. And this was like a 3-hour climb, and I didn't even want to open my bag to get my water bottle whenever we took breaks because I was afraid she would see the champagne bottle and I would spoil the surprise I had planned. But it was just innocuous enough that she didn't notice this giant bottle sticking out of there. And when she heard the wine sloshing, it sounds like a water bottle. Yeah, so that was every 20 minutes, 30 minutes, because I climbed mountains a lot, and she had never climbed a mountain before. So we had to stop very often, and she would take out water, and we'd sit and talk for a few minutes, and then keep walking for another 20 or 30 minutes, and then stop. So in the 10 breaks that it took to climb this mountain, which was 1,700 meters, like a little over 5,000 feet, I don't think I drank water. I might have done it when she was talking to the monk, or there must have been some point. But it took 3.5 hours, a very long time to get to the top. And I was always so worried that like something was going to clink in the bag or she would notice. And she even asked me once, she was like, "Why's your bag so full? You usually don't bring anything." And I just told her something like, "I forgot to take my work clothes out of there," or something like that. So it's really full, but it just has my water bottle. And she was like, at other times, she would ask me, "Aren't you thirsty?" I was like, no, I'm fine. And we made our way up the mountain. We met the aggressive monk. And she was like, "You should have just let him say Chinese people are stronger." And I was like, "Yeah, but I'm not enlightened yet." And then, 3.5 hours later, it was a long trek, and it's very steep at parts. And we made it to the summit, and I was like, "Oh my God, we're here. We're here." And I asked where we should sit, and we chose a little spot alongside the path. And she went off to go throw away some of her trash because she had snacks in her water bottle too. I think she was going to go buy another bottle of water from one of the vendors at the top also. And I was like, perfect. And as soon as she walked away, I zipped open my bag and pulled out the thing of champagne and pulled out these 2 glasses. I think I brought 2 plastic glasses or 2 plastic cups as well. And I laid out like beef jerky and a small piece of cake that I had bought for her and all of these like snacks, like 5 or 6 snacks. And when she came back, the look on her face, the smile that lit up her face was exactly what I had been hoping for and why I had tried so hard to make this a surprise. Because now she had completed her first hike, her first full mountain hike, like a real one. Even though there are stairs up the mountains, it's not easy to continuously climb a mountain for 3.5 hours. And we poured out the wine. Oh, you know what? We didn't have cups, and I realized I didn't bring cups. I just remembered this. What I did instead was I took 2 empty water bottles that we had, and I had my knife with me, and I cut off the top half of them so that we just had the bottom half of the plastic bottles, and those were our plastic cups. And those small plastic cups that she appreciated because she couldn't find any cups after she realized we needed some were just this nice little detail in a story from a newly committed relationship where people are comfortable with each other and realize that we don't care about the cups, like we're having an experience on top of a mountain. And I popped the bottle of champagne and she gave a cute, jolt of surprise when it popped off. It might have been her first champagne or like her second. I know it was right in the beginning because she had never had champagne before, but we had it a couple times because she had graduated medical school or something big happened for her. She passed a test, maybe, I can't remember. And I poured the champagne for her and we toasted. And then after the moment was that I was like, and I felt like my whole body relaxed in relief. Like I didn't have to keep up the charade of, oh yes, I just have a super crazy stuffed backpack of clothes and normal things that don't clink around. But she was so happy, and we talked on the top of the mountain and enjoyed our bottle of wine. And she could drink. She didn't drink a crazy amount, but it was nice. Whenever we went to dinner, she would have a little to drink, which is very, very rare in China. In China, if they drink half a bottle of beer, they are asleep, snoring on the table, or puking. so she could hold her own. We had a few glasses of wine and then finished up our food, and we just kind of hung out on the top and looked out at the nice view, and then made our way back down and went back to Beijing, I guess. I don't really remember, but yeah, that is another very nice memory of my time on Chinese mountains. I hold it very dear and very clearly. I believe that particular adventure was on Taishan, which is a cool mountain you should go climb. Yeah, if you want to talk to me, I am at bitofarambler@gmail.com. I will get back to you if I am at all able. I definitely read all the messages. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one.